Hey guys, it's David from Automotive Press. As you know, I love trucks, especially with body-on-the-frame design, just like what I find in Toyota Land Cruiser or my Lexus GX580, or if you go higher up in price, the Mercedes G-Class. Yes, I do love that model with a V8 model, but what about if they design a G-Class without engine, without a V8 engine, which is the soul of that vehicle? Is that still as good? Well, here we have the 2025 Mercedes G-Class, but now fully electric, and it's called G580 with EQ technology. They had to change the name a little bit because they're no longer using the old system of calling electric cars unique names. Instead, this is now a G-Class or G580 with EQ technology, which means this is fully electric. But does it actually still feel like a gas-powered G-Class? Because that's what makes that G-Class so unique and amazing, with a vault-like door closing, with a solid feel, with go anywhere capability. Well, I'm actually going to tell you that after driving this for a few days, this G-Class actually does feel like a gas version. Of course, it's not quite the same, but it comes pretty close. So let me give you 5 reasons why the electric G-Class or G580 still feels like a gas version of the legendary G-Wagon. Let's go. Welcome back. So here we have what they call the Mercedes G580 with EQ technology, which is a Mercedes way of saying this is fully electric. There's actually an electric motor on each wheel, so a very different design from a gas version. And you guys know I love the V8 powered SUVs in general, so I obviously like G-Wagon with a V8. This one doesn't have a V8, but it's actually more capable in some way because of the enormous amount of power and torque you get from having a fully electric design. And also, surprisingly, it is still body-on-the-frame SUV, so there is still a ladder frame underneath, which makes this vehicle feel like a truck. But before I go too far, let's go and do my usual audit of quality control, which is a bit hard to measure because this is such a unique design. It still kind of looks like a G-Class, but you can tell hood ends here, so I can't really even measure the gap here. But I can measure the gap over here, which is 3.6 millimeter, 3.7, 3.7 again, and actually 4.5 millimeter. And you might wonder, well, does it even make sense to measure the gaps, because this is a completely different design from a normal crossover or SUV. This is still very much following the traditional G-Class with a solid door that feels like a vault, and with that sound. And so the whole door design is different. You can see the hinge outside. It has that classic G-Wagon design. So the gaps are kind of meaningless as far as I'm concerned, so I'm going to turn my attention to the paint job instead, which is this amazing but polarizing matte finish. It's a very expensive paint job, but beautiful paint job. People look at it, they know right away it's a very special paint. Now notice that it is not completely matte, it is semi-matte, which means that there is still a clear coat on top of the paint to protect the paint finish, but of course it's a beautiful paint design. And whether you look at this portion, which is plastic, or the middle portion, the paint matches perfectly, and the actual reflection of the light through this special paint is gorgeous. It looks like a wrap, but it's not. It's actually a paint job, and of course it's expensive paint, so it needs to look good, but in terms of quality it looks fantastic. Now let's take a quick look inside and see how the quality is, and then I'm going to explain to you 5 reasons why this thing still feels like a gas version of the G-Class. So I'm inside the G-Class now. That paint job, by the way, is $8,500 Canadian option, which is ridiculously expensive. But the interior package is even more. It's a $12,000 exclusive interior package, which consists of all this decorative thing you see, including the carbon fiber finish all over the place and blue stitching. So this is obviously one of the most expensive interior you can get, but I have to admit, it is gorgeous. All the blue stitching, it looks fantastic. Everything is straight. I don't obviously see anything loose. This is a little bit loose, but it doesn't make any squeaks or rattle. But just the extensive use of leather and carbon fiber with blue weaved into the actual carbon fiber looks gorgeous. It does have updated infotainment system, huge panel, both driver's side and the also infotainment system. So it's updated with all the information. It does have a really interesting technology, which I'll showcase later, which allows the car to turn 360 degrees on a dirt road. So I'll demonstrate that a little bit later in the video, but all I can say is that it's gorgeous interior. Does it look like a $250,000 SUV? I suppose it depends on your definition, but first glance, in terms of quality, in terms of material finish, it does look very expensive. Okay, so I'm back outside of the G-Class. This G580, does it really feel like and act like and performs like a gas version of the G-Class? Well, it does, because the first reason is the fact that it actually looks exactly like a gas version. We got the classic design, as I mentioned, with the hood ending over here. This is a G-Wagon design. I got this big turning lights on the hood that you can see from the inside. The front part looks cleaned up and obviously it looks a little bit different. Still very recognizable as a G-Class. And as you go through the side, you have all the classic G-Class attributes, such as exposed door hinges, push button door, closes with a thumb. And even though we don't have the muffler exhaust system on the side like on the gas version, you even get a kind of a replica of a spare tire in the back. This happens to be a storage, and I can actually open this, and there's charging cable inside. So it's obviously not a spare tire. It's kind of a clever way to store things, including the cable. But the basic design still looks like a G-Class. For all intents and purposes, if you don't know any better and you're just kind of walking by it, you'll instantaneously recognize this as a G-Wagon and might not even realize that this is a fully electric version and not gas version. So I think in terms of design, they've done an amazing job, and they were able to kind of replicate the look and feel of a gas version of the G-Class, even though this is fully electric underneath. So that's the first reason. The second reason why this still feels like a G-Class are in fine details. One of them, of course, is the fact that this door, as I mentioned before, opens, closes, and feels like a traditional classic G-Wagon. And it is a bit hard to close because of this special latch mechanism, so I have to bang it pretty hard, as I will do right now. But that sound is what makes every G-Class owner smile, even though it is a bit of an effort to push this button. Well, what can you say? There are no other vehicles out in the market that feels like this when you close the door. And you do have to press this button to open it, just like in gas version of the G-Class. And thankfully I can lock and unlock by touching this door handle though, so that's an improvement over some of the older G-Class we used to have. And this boxy design with also the rear opening that opens sideways, just like in gas version of G-Class. So all these attributes makes it feel like same as the regular G-Class. So passengers who just hop into the vehicle, look at the interior, look at the way the door closes, probably wouldn't even notice that this is electric version until you actually start driving, because it's very quiet, so you don't hear that V8 sound, and that's one of the telltale signs that it is not a gas version. But here you go. See, I can't even close the back door properly because I gotta really push it hard. And again, same sound. I'm pretty sure that the engineers spend many hours trying to replicate the sound of all the doors to be the same, to have that vault-like feel. And again, this is some of those subtle things that makes this one feel exactly like the gas version. The third reason why the electric G-Class is kind of like a gas G-Class is the fact that it is still sitting on body-on-frame design. So most electric vehicles do not use body-on-frame design because they have a battery underneath. They have the motors, sometime in the front, sometime in the back, sometime all four wheels like this one, but they don't really use ladder frame, which is engineer's way of describing an actual frame that is separate from the body. But in the case of G-Class, there is an actual frame which you can't see. I opened the hood, but you can't see either. Now, there's no trunk, by the way, in the front, which is unfortunate because there's kind of lack of storage overall if you think about that, and could have really used the space in the front. But anyway, I couldn't see the actual frame from here, but if you look underneath, you'll see an actual frame running. And because it's an electric car, there's obviously a battery that's sandwiched underneath, which acts as a structural battery, so it does form part of the body underneath. But otherwise, there is an actual frame that I can see. I think the design is a little bit different, but I am glad that they kept the body frame design because it has a very distinct feel. You sit nice and high, and there's a bit of a truck feel to it that you can't replicate if you don't have body on the frame design. For that reason, this G-Class does feel like a gasoline version as well. Okay, so I'm now driving the G-Class. Again, this is called G580 with EQ technology, a bit of an awkward name. But anyway, does it feel like a gas G-Class? Well, I gotta admit, it does in some way, but in other ways it's also very obvious it's an electric car. So for example, in terms of acceleration, it has 579 horsepower and crazy amount of torque as well. So if I step on the Accelerator, it takes off like no other G-Class. Even compared to the V8 powered ones, this one accelerates ridiculously fast. 0 to 60 just over 4 seconds. So kind of a performance of a sports car. And from that perspective, it's actually better than a gas version. But coming back to the basic driving feel, I'm glad that they've still built in some feel to the steering. So the steering is reasonably heavy. It doesn't feel like hydraulic power steering, but it has some of that character, and it's got better feedback than I thought. Much better than some other electric cars I've driven. So it has a good steering input. It rides very high. I'm looking down onto the hood and onto the road, just like in the G-Class. So yeah, if I blink for a moment, I could kind of convince myself I might be driving a gas version of G-Class because of the steering feel, because of basic characteristic of the truck. It kind of drives like a truck because of body and frame design. So all that's really good stuff. It does have, though, a very sensitive brake, which I'm not too crazy about. And part of that is just the whole design process with electric vehicles. It has a built-in regen braking, so the brakes always feel a little bit sensitive. But even if I turn off the regen braking, which is called recuperation in the Mercedes term, it still feels like an electric car from that perspective. So when you brake and when you drive around city, yes, it kind of feels like a gasoline version of G-Class, but there's no denying that it's also clearly an electric vehicle. So you kind of have to drive it and decide whether this is for you. I think if you just take it for a short drive, you can kind of convince yourself this is still very much like a gasoline version of G-Class. As you can tell, it's a little bit bumpy also. But when you drive longer distances and under many different circumstances, you'll realize, okay, it still has many attributes and characteristics of an electric vehicle. So overall, it feels like a truck, it feels like a G-Class, but with some electric car characteristic. So here I am beginning to kind of conclude what this G-Class really represents, which brings me to the fifth point, and that is the capability in terms of off-roading. You might think because it's an electric car, it cannot possibly be as good as a gas version, but in some ways it's actually better. For example, the water wading depth is 33.5 inches, so it can actually go up to 33.5 inches of water with no issues whatsoever. It doesn't affect the motors or battery, and that is 5.9 inches more than the gas version. So underneath you can't see it, but it's completely protected, and all the batteries and the motors are also protected as well. So you can actually basically cross a river that's 33.5 inches deep, and that is better than the gas version. Also, because there's a motor on each wheel, the ability to control this vehicle is very different from gas version, which has a center lock differential and the rear lock differentials. You obviously don't need locking differentials because this is not gasoline version, but I can independently control the wheels to bring a very interesting attribute to this vehicle, such as ability to turn 360 degrees. So if I'm on a gravel road, I can actually turn this vehicle 360 both directions without moving the vehicle. So I can go into a pathway somewhere, and if I decide I need to go backward, turn 360 or 180 and go different directions. So that's a really cool features, and that you cannot have on gasoline version. So the basic off-roading capability, and in terms of ability to cross river or some other forms of water, this actually beats the gas version of the G-Class. And that is my kind of final point, is that if we're comparing the electric G-Class to gas G-Class and saying that this is not as capable in terms of off-roading, then it's fair to say that it just isn't attractive. But I'm really shockingly surprised that not only is this more capable than the gas version of the G-Class in terms of off-roading, but it's also faster from 0 to 60. It's also more up-to-date in terms of electronics and features and technology, and it's a little bit roomier because of the battery underneath. So basically, I'm not compromising anything from the gas version to the electric vehicle, because actually you're gaining more capability, and that's what makes this G580 very attractive. Having said all that, it is still an electric car. It still feels a little bit different from gas version. For example, the recuperation or regen braking is pretty strong. You can turn that off, but it comes back by default, and that kind of makes it a little bit feel. The brakes are also very sensitive, and clearly you don't hear the V8 sound. So for me, I obviously prefer a gas version, the V8 powered G-Class. But I do admit, if you're in love with electric car and you still want to buy a G-Class or something similar to it, this thing is very attractive for the right price, because it is not cheap and most of us can't afford it. So I hope you enjoyed this video about the G580 compared to the gas version of the G-Class. I think it's still very attractive, but it is a lot of money. If you enjoyed my video, please give me a thumbs up, make some comments, and if you haven't done so yet, would you kindly subscribe as well. Until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.